Hey there, Groovesters, Groove Stars all over the world. Ridgely here. Super excited to have a dear friend. We go way back with us today. CEO, entrepreneur, businessman for a very long time. Lots and lots to share. Can't wait to get started. Let's jump in with the CEO of KeepPunching.com, Kerry Daigle. How you doing, my brother?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'll tell you, I'm really excited to be able to reconnect with you because, as you said, when we talk about going way back, we talk about going way back. I mean, we were even involved. We co-authored a book together.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Long time ago, man. It's so good to see you again. So we be able to tap into your wisdom. And let's jump in here, man, because you have a heck of a story. So take us back to the beginning. How did you get started on this entrepreneurial venture, so to speak, in the early days?
Well, it's pretty easy. I was not very good in high school. So a lot of people ask me all the time, what prevented you from going to college? And I told them, high school. So I remember going to my guidance counselor at the end of my high school days. And I remember her telling me, Kerry, what are your goals? What do you plan to do? And here I am, this 17-year-old kid graduating high school, and I'm living in a little town of 15,000 people, a little town called Opelousas, Louisiana, which you're very familiar with. And living with my grandparents who were illiterate, couldn't read, couldn't write, lived in a shotgun house. And everybody in the neighborhood and everybody in the city kind of knows each other, very small community. And I remember her looking at me and telling me, I want to really hear what your dream is, what your goals are when you graduate. I said, I'm going to be a boxing promoter. And she laughed hysterically. And she said, you're going to be what? I said, that's what I'm going to do. And I remember she talked me out of it. She started telling me, listen, I know your grandparents, I know where you live, I know where you are as far as economically is concerned. And Kerry, in all actuality, you're going to need to get just a decent job so you can support yourself and help your grandparents. But she kind of hit me in the heart because she mentioned my grandparents who actually raised me. And so she kind of took my dream away until I got home. And when I got home, Maman Daigle, who couldn't read, who couldn't write, who couldn't speak English, she could only speak French. She sat me down and she looked right at me and she said, why would you listen to her? I said, well, she's my guidance counselor. She's well-educated. She's very smart. And I'm really not that smart, Mama. I mean, I'm really not. She says, but what does she know about boxing promoting? I said, nothing. She says, well, here's my advice to you. Of course, it's all in French. She says, you need to find some people that are very successful in that industry of boxing promoting. And you need to just clone what they're doing, hang around those people, and the rest will happen. And needless to say, at the age of 21, I promoted my first show on national television, Wide World of Sports. And the rest is history. I've been doing it for over 40 years.
Yeah. And just because this is so super interesting to everybody, Kerry, tell us a little bit about some of the guys that you've had a chance to hang out with. What are some of the interesting, moments that you've had with some of the great boxers, something that comes to your mind? Because all of us are like, oh man, come on, Kerry, tell us a little more. Give us a little more juice.
Oh, there's so much to talk about. I wish I could tell you everything, but a lot of the professional boxers that you're going to meet, big name guys, are really pretty humble guys, except when the camera hits. So when the camera hits, of course, you're in the sales stage. You're selling the show, for viewership. And if it's a pay-per-view fight, positively, you want to create more people buying the show. So you're in the entertainment world. You're dealing with two different personalities, one when the camera hits and one behind the scenes. And usually behind the scenes, the professional fighters are very humble. very, very humble, very kind, very generous, which a lot of people don't see. But I guess one of the best lessons came from promoters, because those are the people I was really learning from. And I remember Don King. We were in Las Vegas, and it was after a big fight, and Don was walking with several of us, bring us to a restaurant to eat. And we sitting down in the restaurant, and you have a law degree, and you can understand this. I remember we're sitting down with a couple of attorneys, and these attorneys were having a few little toddies, having a few little drinks, and feeling good about themselves, and young and a little egotistical. You know what that's like, law degree, working with Don King, young guys. And one was looking at the other one, and Don sat right next to him. And there was about 15 of us in the audience. And one of them was talking to the other, and they looked at each other and said, boy, man, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And, they were just like really proud of themselves, like peacocks. I mean, the feathers were coming out, everything was happening. And I remember Don, real quiet when the camera's not hitting. Don was an interesting guy, very intelligent, and he made many millions of dollars as a world-class promoter. And I remember him turning around and looking at both of them and smiling. He says, let me teach you boys something. He says, first of all, I'm not college educated, but you work for me. Second thing is that what you just said about not what you know and who you know is totally wrong. When you're going to be extremely successful, it's how many people know you. When you get there, son, you're going to be at the top of your game, and you're nowhere close. And man, I sat there and I started thinking. I pulled out a little napkin, Ridgely, and I wrote that on a napkin. And I've carried that quote with me forever. And I always remember what he said. It's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's how many people know you. And think about this a minute. As I was remembering that quote, I was mentioning the quote to people in a lot of speaking engagements and so forth. I'll never forget this. That quote was so very powerful, because I remember this other person who was a highly successful promoter. And he said, well, he was the master. Think about what he just said. Not a college grad, made millions of dollars as a promoter. But no matter where he went in the world, no social media in those days, you would recognize Don King. You'd say, that is Don King. So he was a perfect picture of that quote, because everybody knew who he was. So he had accomplished that. And it's true, whatever he went, whatever country it was, whatever city it was, that's Don King. And the only other person that came close to that was Muhammad Ali. He was in the same category. I think this was way before social media. So you think they knew what they were doing? They were really good at it. And then you bring in George Foreman. He came in later and came back many years later after being heavyweight champion of the world, and came back a couple of decades later, and at the age of 45, won the heavyweight championship of the world again against a 20-something-year-old guy who was undefeated, who had just beaten Evander Holyfield, and became the first heavyweight in history to become heavyweight champion of the world at 45, and did it 2 decades later from the previous time that he was a world champion. So there's so much to learn from never quitting, to keep punching, as you say, to believe in yourself, to step forward, and learn how to promote yourself. And who is better than George Foreman? I mean, you may not know George Foreman personally, but somebody has a George Foreman grill.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
And he hasn't done well. He hasn't done real bad, with those grills. And one thing I'd recommend to everyone that's an entrepreneur, anyone that even thinks about becoming an entrepreneur, or they're maybe stalling in their white collar profession, is to get his book that's several years old called Knockout Entrepreneur and study it, because it's not about boxing in a sense, it's about business in general. And he is probably one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the sporting arena, period, in the world.
What do you think, Kerry? Those guys at the very top, you had a chance to be with them personally. If you were to pick like one or two things that you saw in a Muhammad Ali, a George Foreman, that we could learn from, what would be those characteristics that the up and coming person could like embrace? Obviously, confidence. You mentioned one of them, keep punching, but don't give up.
Confidence, hard work, dedication, believing in their craft, studying it. Confidence. To be a professional boxer at the level that they were, you better have a lot of confidence. Because when that bell rings, baby, it's just you standing in that corner and another guy on the other end that wants to take everything you got away from you. And they do that with these. And the confidence level to be able to do that in front of millions of people on national TV, on pay-per-view. And today, the heavyweight champion of the world today, Tyson Fury, is from Europe. He's 6'9", 275 pounds. He just recently fought in front of 94,000 people live, watching him fight in Europe. To think that it's just two people in the ring, not two teams of 50 different competitors, and a huge amount of commentators and people voicing their opinions, and really just millions of dollars behind the production of that type of show with these teams, whether it's football or soccer or anything, just two combatants. And you got 94,000 people that show up live to be able to see that. And many of them sitting in rafters where the ring is so far down, it's kind of like watching a little game that you might own and you have on your desk, in a sense. It's amazing. And those kind of things are really interesting. There's so much we could talk about. I guess George Foreman comes to mind because I look at him as one of my mentors over the last 35 years. And he would just say things that you'd have to stop and just listen and watch, like, oh, that was really powerful. But he was just so confident.
Now, how do you build that? Let's say, from your perspective, you watched all these guys, you promoted all these guys. I know you mentioned some of the really big names, but there's been all kinds of other guys that you've been promoting for 4 decades now. How does the young or the early stage entrepreneur build some of that confidence? What do you recommend is something that they should do or focus on or listen to or read or whatever?
Well, it's something you and I both have been teaching this for 3 or 4 decades. So I'm probably going to say something and sound like an echo coming from Risley Goldsboro. The first thing is the people that you hang around. So if you're around real positive, forward-thinking people, you will become part of who they are. That was something my uneducated grandmother taught me in my early years. The second thing is the books you read. And a person who doesn't read books has just put themselves in the same position as someone that's illiterate. So think about that a minute. So if you quit reading, you just put yourself in the same position as someone that can't read. I had a great fortune in my life because my grandmother and grandparents couldn't read. So naturally, when I would read something, a book, and I was looking and reading a book, they would just smile from ear to ear. I remember one day, Ridgely, my grandmother walking up behind me and putting her hand on my shoulder. I'm reading a book. And I look up and she's got this big crocodile tear running down her cheek. And I said, Maman, are you sad? Are you okay? She said, no, in French, those are tears of joy. It's so refreshing to see that you can read. What a gift. Wow. And, so I was fortunate enough to be able to have someone like her to teach me the value of reading because she couldn't. And it's kind of stuck with me. So the books you read are really important. And I tell people all the time, anybody can read 24 books a year. How do you do it? Simple. Don't look at how large a book is. An average book is 15 chapters. Read one chapter a day, morning, noon, and night. If you do so, you're going to have 2 a day, 2 a month. And at the end of the year, the average would be 24 books. You'll be so far advanced, though, the people that are not studying humans and how to be successful, that you're gonna be in the back seat, where you could be in the front seat driving. You can be looking in the rearview mirror, but really you're paying attention going through that windshield, looking forward. So the books you read and the people you hang around, the 2 things that will instill confidence in you. That's important, especially whether it's the sports arena, especially when you're competing at a high level, or you're an entrepreneur and trying to build your business. Who are the people that are around you on a regular basis?
Now, you mentioned earlier, The Knockout Entrepreneur by George Foreman. What would be another 2 books that Kerry Daigle would recommend to any entrepreneur? Of all the books you've read, if you had to pick 3, we'll go with that one being 1. What would be 2 other ones?
Well, I do a lot of mastermind sessions where I have a lot of people that I mastermind with. And now on Zoom, it's so easy to do because you can see the body language and not just a telephone call. But the one book, if I have to mastermind someone that wants to move into the entrepreneurial role, they have to read and study a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, they have to read it and study it because it's the beginning of entrepreneurship. It will teach you the difference between being someone that trades time for dollars or someone that trades time for dollars in their own right by owning their own business, or learning how to get involved with possibly a direct sales company to develop residual income. So there's so many different ways to grow and do things entrepreneurially. But that's one book that's so important that they have to study it. And my job at that point is to come back with questions and make sure they've read it thoroughly. Because the thing with most people that jump into entrepreneurship that come from the private sector or come from the job market, it's a big change. All of a sudden, there's no one telling them when to show up at work, what time, when they can go to lunch, what time they can go home. They start realizing that they have that ability to pick and choose the times, but all of a sudden, they find out that they might be working a little later than normal or getting up a little earlier than normal. And sometimes the lunch hour is 1 or 2 hours later than normal. But it's the price you pay for success. And Rich Dad, Poor Dad, I think, teaches you that. And then there's several other books. I like to use a lot of the speaking books. Speak and Grow Rich is a very good book. I like Life is a Series of Presentations by Tony Geary, who's taught some of the major speakers out there how to speak, what to say, how to use body language, how to use the right terminology. One thing I learned, and actually, originally when I first met you, you were involved in direct sales. And I learned something from you that was very important at that time. And what I learned at that particular time, and I've carried with me for many years is that you are the product. You're the one that told me this when I was 37 years old, I think, when I met you. I'm 70 today. So maybe 38. I don't know, but I was pretty young. I was in my 30s. And I remember you telling me, you're the product. Until you're really good and better than most, and you continue to improve yourself, your product's not going to move. You're the product. And I had to understand that early. And believe me, I had a lot of work to do, because in my other business with the Juice Plus company, which we haven't spoken about, I've been with them 33 years. I came from high level athletes, one athlete trying to be number one in the world, a world champion. And that's not easy. There's a lot of people in the world, so to be number one in the world is not an easy task. And, to be able to instill enough confidence in them and teach them how to get there had everything to do with these things that we're speaking about. But in that industry, you have to really be a little more, I want to use the right word here. I don't want to, because we're being recorded, being very direct, I guess is a friendly word. And direct in the sense that sometimes you have to get in the athlete's face and wake them up, and shake them up and grab them physically. Where in the other arena that I got into in direct sales, you got to back up a little bit and learn how to be a little softer. So for me, the first 2 or 3 years was difficult because I was kind of in your face kind of guy. What is it you don't get? Let's get rolling. Get off your BUTT. Let's go. And like my Papa Daigle used to tell me all the time, he always said, the best way to get on your feet is to get off your ass.
Yeah, right. Of course he does. We love Mama and Papa Daigle for sure. Amazing lessons. And, I think in a lot of ways, they were more educated than most people, by the way. They may have been illiterate, but they were very educated because they were very, very smart. So take us back. I always like to ask this question. Tell me about in business, could be keep punching with your Juice Plus business, doesn't matter. Tell me about one setback that you had to go through. And what was it like? And what did you learn from overcoming that obstacle, whatever it was?
Wow. That's a good one. 1981. Never forget it. I was 1981. I can't remember 70. I was pretty young. I was born in 1952. So you do the numbers. Okay. Went bankrupt. One day I walked up to the bank I was doing business with, one bank. Not very smart. And I'm learning how to be an entrepreneur. I had 2 or 3 businesses I was running. And I pull on the door, it's locked. And so I leave. I said, I come back tomorrow. It's probably a holiday and I'm not paying attention. Come back next day, pull on the door, it's locked. And there's a sign up there, closed FDIC. And I didn't know what the FDIC was. I had no idea. I was a learning entrepreneur. But come to find out, FDIC had shut this bank down. Every line of credit I owned for every business was in one bank. Instead of dealing with 3 or 4, one bank. So naturally, in 1981, people were very much afraid of stepping out. Banking business changed drastically. And immediately, because my line of credits were gone, I lost everything I had. I went from being fairly successful to losing everything I had and living in my car for about 3 months. And then a friend loaned me a mobile home to live in and said, all you got to pay is $100 a month rent. And I want to tell you, I didn't have $100, And I went into hiding. It was very difficult. My ego was crushed, my pride. I would go have a post office box because I knew the mailman originally, and I didn't want him delivering anything to my mobile home. So I got a P.O. box and made sure all my mail went there. And I would check my P.O. box in the afternoons because no one was there in the afternoon, mid-afternoon. And so one day I'm checking my P.O. box, pulling my mail out, and a hand comes on my shoulder, kind of like the Momo story about reading. And I turn around, and it's a guy I knew really well. And he and his father had a very successful business in the city of Opelousas. And he says, "How you doing, Kerry? I hadn't seen you in quite a while." And what do? Your personality is pretty much the same. You put a big smile on, everything's going great. That's the answer most of us give. Everything's going great. I'm doing phenomenal. Big smile. And he was real quiet. He just kind of stared me down. He says, "Well, Kerry," he says, "you're not telling me the truth." He says, "Because you've been very active in this city for a long time. Nobody's seen you around for about 18 months. And you're not doing well. Tell me what's going on." And so I kind of broke down at that point to kind of tell my story, a little bit of it. And he gave me some advice where when I jumped in my car to go back to my little mobile home, life changed for me. And this is what he said. He said, "Kerry Daigle," he says, "I'm going to teach you something." I said, "I'm ready, man. Teach me. I need it." He says, "Life and circumstances maybe took away your finances and your income. But what they haven't taken away is something I know that you own, your skills. You've kept them. That's a huge asset. I know what you've done with your skills before. Put them back to work." Man, I was just leaning back, Ridgely, and looking at him like, wow, no one's talked to me like that before, because I really didn't want to speak to anyone. I was a hermit. I was hiding. And I jumped in my car, and I tell you what, you would have thought I was part of NASCAR. I got in that son of a gun. I drove back to my mobile home, and I sat down. I pulled out a little tablet and a pencil. I don't think I even had a pen at that time. And I started writing notes, things I was going to get done. And at the age of 42, I was set financially for the rest of my life. So it's amazing what words from people, acknowledgement, kind words, lessons, if you listen well enough, what you can learn. But I had to learn the hard way, and this is what I did learn from another mentor. Everyone always said knowledge is power. So untrue. Knowledge is not power. And what I had to learn was that applied knowledge is power. And so this gentleman who gave me this advice at the post office gave me the opportunity to say, wow, I've got the skill. I've got some knowledge, but it's been on ice. I've got to apply it. And I did. And the rest is history. And I've been blessed. Really have been.
That's such a great story. What do you think was the shift? Because obviously those words made a pivot that woke something up inside you to say, hey, wait a second, I still have all these skills. And then as you built it back and built your fortune back and all of that kind of thing, what do you think were the one or two characteristics that kept you going and got you to that financial freedom at 42?
Number one, finding the right fit for who I was. I was great at negotiating and talking to people. So find my fit. Going into that unknown world, stepping out of your comfort zone, which is something people don't like to do. They like to stay in their comfort zone. Stepping out of your comfort zone and being very confident. What I was reading before, I doubled and tripled. I started reading anything. anything and everything I could. 2 books a month were not enough. I was reading 3 and 4. I was studying everything I could. I'd pull a book out and I would take a book like this, maybe this Les Brown book, and I would just take it and I'd start reading. And I had this highlighter and I would highlight stuff in the book. Then I'd take this ink pen and I'd write down an idea and then I would apply it. And I just kept reading and learning and learning and reading and learning and learning and absorbing and then applying. And it all came from books. Everything came from books and people, but the right people. So I hope that answers your question. I'm not quite sure, but that's what worked for me. And I believe can work for anyone. I've been tagged by my peers as a mental fitness coach. Well, and it makes sense. A lot of people wondering, do you work with a lot of mental people with mental problems? I said, yeah, I do. I said, most people have mental problems. It's not a disease. It's just part of their lives. It's the people that hang around, the things that they're hearing. My job is to get them mentally fit and to do a mental enema and get you cleaned up a little bit, So, and that's the idea. Mental fitness is everything, So as soon as I get into a conversation with something that's negative, I have a tendency, and sometimes my wife, Mickey, who you know very well, will remind me that I'm a little bit too hard there. I'm trying to get better even at 70, is that when something real negative comes into my life, it's like I wash it out. I get that person out as if they don't exist anymore. And I've almost forgotten their names. It's just something that's embedded in me. And it's because I need that for me to continue to move forward. So I don't want that around me, and I make sure it's not there. And you have to be strong to do that. Yeah, you have to be very strong to do that.
Yeah, for sure you do. And I remember early on when we were meeting and doing things together, you used to always say, you got to get rid of that stinking thinking.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. It stuck with me because it's got the ring to it, get rid of that stinking thinking.
I'm going to do a little promo here about this book. Has been out now for 5 years and still selling like crazy. Mm-hmm. It's a pocket book, and one chapter strictly on stinking thinking. Mm-hmm. So it's a great subtitle. I'm doing a little self promo here. I hope that's
Please
okay.
do. It's all good. We'll send somebody a link where they can get it.
Dreams, fairy tales, and miracles. But the title you're going to like because of the conversation that we're having. Things I learned about success from Mama and Papa Daigle that you won't learn at Harvard or Yale.
Exactly. I love that. That is so fantastic because those lessons are universal, and those things apply to anybody that's willing to pay attention and humbly take in that information. So, I just love it, man. You get on your feet, get off your ass, right? Exactly. As you look forward, and we're in this time of, the social media thing, the bubble that people go into, the stories that they tell themselves. One of the challenges that I'm seeing out there, and I'd love to get your wisdom on this, channeling Mama and Papa. How can people kind of find themselves, find that great fit? Because you said finding a great fit is for real, but there's so much fake out there. What can we do about that?
Well, one thing is we rely, I think, a little bit too much on social media. There's nothing more powerful than a private and a personal and a live conversation with a human being. That's never going to change. And those are the things that are going to be very effective for anyone's success. We can do all the things we want in meeting with people. Fortunately for me, I was able to meet Ridgely Goldsboro live and in person, and spent quite a bit of time with him and learned a lot from the early Ridgely that I've carried with me today, because that Ridgely was very successful in direct sales and knew a lot about it. And I've taken a lot of what I learned from his publications, from some of the things that he was doing. And I've taken that with me into the direct sales industry. And I've been very successful at it, but just listening and paying attention, having a journal, writing things down, and going after it. And of course, at that time, Risley, you had the opportunity because of who you were at that time. You were involved with all the superstars in that industry. And I was able to meet some of those superstars through, again, who do you meet? Boom. And you were able to make sure that I met those people. And honestly, at many of the times, I would use your name to open some doors. Because early in my career, I didn't know all these people, and they knew who you were. And I said, well, heck, do you know Richard Goldsboro? So I use that to my advantage. That's an example. You're one, and I've done that probably with 10 different people as a door opener. But it's so important to be able to know people on a personal level and meet with a human being. There's nothing better than human touch. So one thing I teach, I'm glad you brought that up, is that every day, no matter what you're doing, so we're so hooked up on social media today. Every day we do Zooms, we do social media, we do all this stuff now. But every day a person needs to pick this baby up and make a personal phone call. But really, I encourage people to do 3 personal phone calls a day. Just have personal conversations with people on the phone and start creating conversations again so that you can become better connected to the human spirit. That's important. There's nothing more powerful than that. A text is not going to work. There's no emotion involved there. So text and these messages through Messenger and so forth, they're good to communicate with for appointments and maybe to say hello and check this video out or look at this. And it keeps us going. It keeps us promoting our wares, more or less, but nothing is more powerful than picking the phone up. So everyone that I mastermind has to call 3 people a day and have a personal conversation, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 20 minutes. And it may seem like a long time, but in the long run, there's nothing more powerful than creating a relationship that lasts. Mm-hmm. And that's what's important. Now, you and I haven't spoken in a long time. Mm-hmm. But one thing that we haven't actually stayed in touch like we should have, in my opinion.
I agree.
So, but what's happened is through this recent connection, here we are today. I'm doing an interview for Risley Goldsboro, and it's like going back in time to 25, 30 years ago. Yeah. But that human connection that you and I had never left. So although we didn't see each other socially on social media because of the pandemic and other reasons, here we are still connected because we made that human connection. Mm-hmm. There's nothing more powerful than that.
I couldn't agree more, man. I was so happy when you said we could get together. I was like, oh, man, I get to connect with my brother, Kerry Daigle. I was so fired up about this. I couldn't wait. I was like chomping at the bit. In fact, all day long today, because we're doing this in the afternoon all day. I was like, oh, man, I get to talk to Kerry later. This is going to be good. Because I knew not only was I excited to connect with you on a human level, heart to heart, but I also knew the great wisdom that was going to come out of all your years of experience. And even I just have to acknowledge this because I was thinking about this earlier today in anticipation of this, about how Keep Punching, the name of your company, Keep Punching. Of course, it's about boxing, but it's about so much more than boxing.
It's about everything. Business, continuing, never quitting, just keep punching. You get knocked down, get up and keep punching.
Yeah, man. Kerry, final words, any last words you want to leave with the world out there? I know 2 words, but anything besides that you want to say to the world, having a chance to get introduced to you for the first time based on your experience, your wisdom, everything you've been through, any thoughts?
Well, I'm going to ask everyone to visit my website, keeppunching.com, get to meet me and know who I am and what I do. And if I could help you, no matter who you are, I can't promise you I can spend days and hours and weeks with you, but if there's something I can do to help someone move forward, it's something that I am committed to doing. I'll tell you why. After many years of struggling in my early years and then losing everything I had in 1981 and coming back, the mentors I had around me changed my life.
Mm.
And they encouraged me, they acknowledged me. Something you were very good at is acknowledging people. And they stayed in touch with me and they kept encouraging me. And I went back to every one of them after I was very successful. And every one of them I went to and I said, okay, it's time for me to repay you for what you've given me. After all these years, everything you've given me, your heart, your soul, your wisdom. And interestingly, Ridgely, the answers all came back the same. What we've taught you, teach others. That's the price you need to pay. And so I live with that every day. So what I do today, I live for testimonials. I live for a testimonial from Rizzy Goldsboro that says something nice. I live for testimonials. So that's what I do today. That's it primarily. It's pretty simple stuff.
Yeah. Pass it on, that mentorship, man. For everybody out to the world, unbelievable time we spent with Kerry Daigle. And I remind all of you, as well as hit the button, go check out keeppunching.com. More important than that, in your life, whatever you're doing today, keep punching. Thank you so much, Kerry D. I appreciate you. Love you, man, and your family and everybody. On behalf of everybody that's going to get a chance to hear this, we deeply, deeply appreciate your thoughts, your wisdom, and everything you've given us. Thank you so much.
Keep punching.